Hello, friends. Should Christians fight, and what should that look like? This is the topic of today's video as we analyze Gavin Ortlund's claims on fundamentalism, as he describes it in one of his recent videos. Please excuse my voice today as I came down with whatever infected my 4-month-old a couple of days ago. Nonetheless, I decided to battle through because this conversation touches on several points that I consider essential to my ministry and the ministry of the church. Here's a few bullet points I hope to cover. Who sets the rules for Christian dialogue? When is it appropriate to demonize the other side? Is Ortlund's characterization of fundamentalists fair, or is he just in damage control mode after his recent controversies? Why is young earth creationism important to me, and why is it overlooked as an essential issue in the church? Is Dr. Gavin Ortlund guilty of promoting misleading information on the age of the universe when it comes to church history? And finally, is it fair to call Gavin Ortlund and others like him liberal? I'll answer those questions for you and more as we continue. As usual, I'll ask that you please share, like, subscribe, and comment. I would love to hear your thoughts, and it does give me feedback that I can take into consideration for future videos. Now let's jump into Ortlund.
It is no wonder to me that in the upsurge of liberalism that we are facing in the early 21st century and the changes in the world right now, no surprise at all that you're going to see an upsurge corresponding to that of a kind of new set of fundamentalist tendencies. But we have to remember dangers in both directions.
Okay, so what Ortlund is doing here, in case you didn't see his video, I'll put a link in the description if you didn't get a chance to watch it already, but basically he's setting up historical fundamentalism, what the word means, and then he's basically showing a neo-fundamentalism and the dangers of it. So part of what I want to analyze in this video is his assessment legitimate, and can people like me and you, if you're a young earth creationist, can we be adequately painted fundamentalists if it's an issue that we're passionate about? So
let's identify
that's what he's doing
three
here.
Possible dangers in historic fundamentalism that we can see in the 20th century without a goal to label people, without a goal to draw direct arrows, but just to put them on the table, try to think about this together. Here we go. Try to go fast, but I got a lot to say. Number one, fundamentalism often finds its identity in what it's against more than what it's for. Do we see that in the church today? Yes. There are people who build massive social media platform doing nothing but attacking and tearing down other Christians. Now look, polemics is a part of faithfulness to the gospel. Sometimes people will say, look, your channel is called Truth Unites. Why are you criticizing purgatory? Why are you criticizing it? It's truth unites. Being clear about what we're against is necessary. I'm not against theological polemics, but it's not healthy when that becomes your whole identity, when this is what gives you real passion and energy, when this is what draws an army to coalesce around you, and people are doing that today. Note the emboldened words in this verse from Jude. He says, I was eager to talk about salvation, but it was necessary to contend. This is how it should be. This should be the emotional prioritizations in our heart. Celebrating the gospel should be eager. We should be eager for that. Contending against error should be a matter of necessity. A lot of people reverse that. That's a fundamentalist tendency.
I'm going to stop the video for a second here to discuss this issue. Fundamentalism. Can we kind of whittle it down and define it into something today, and what does it look like today? Because that's a big part of his video. He's about 15 minutes deep into things here. He gives a whole history of fundamentalism, which is great. Well done. Phenomenal. Talks about the split that it has from evangelicalism within the Christian community. When I think fundamentalist, I think about, the maybe 70s, 80s, 90s. I think about Jerry Falwell, the religious right movement, where we saw Christians getting involved in politics and sort of encouraging the Christian community, the world, the country, to get back to these sort of traditionalist values. That's kind of what I think of when I think more so of fundamentalism. You get the picture of somebody with a Bible thumpers, beating somebody over the head with a Bible, thumping somebody with their Bible, literally. And so that kind of negative connotation like that, although I would say this, as we've now seen how culture has gone and people have gone and been very negative about what they've called fundamentalism in that time, can we really be that critical anymore? I actually look back and I think, wow, the fundamentalists who I hated on a little bit back then. I appreciated some of what they did, but can we really be that scornful? Can we actually be that critical of what they were doing? And maybe they were actually exposing where our culture was headed. I mean, my goodness, look at the insanity of our world today and tell me we haven't gone off in a wrong direction. I'll be honest with you, I might actually be becoming a little more fundamentalist. I mean, by any definition, quite frankly. If you look at where my ministry was 10 years ago, I was very much more accommodating, more willing to be, in the eyes of the world, tolerant, it's a bunch of garbage. That tolerance is a trash word that doesn't even mean anything to the people that are demanding tolerance. Explain that too, how someone demands tolerance. It's an oxymoron and it falls in on itself. But this concept of fundamentalism, can we whittle it down today? And can we say that the people today who are, he'll go into his video in a few minutes here, young earth creationism. He's going to go into that. He's going to go into a couple of other issues. Can we say that there is this negative fundamentalist attitude within the church today, or is there something else at work? I actually think it's the latter. And as much as I can appreciate what Gavin Ortlund does on so many different issues, this is one where I quite frankly just think he's wrong. And if you know anything about the recent controversy that he's been in the midst of with Mary Basham's book on the strange bedfellows of modern evangelical leaders, Christian pastors, and the political world, then you should probably take a minute and look some of that up. I know that he did a response video because she called him out specifically for some comments that he made on the issue of global warming. So getting into this, I feel like that's very much in the backdrop of pretty much everything he's saying here. So is this really a genuine, legitimate critique of what could be modern fundamentalism, or is this just damage control? Let's continue.
And Marsden highlights how this tendency played out in the fundamentalist evangelical split. He talks about how part of the evangelical heritage is more open and expansive, but part of what went into evangelicalism is, note these words, closed, cautious, and defensive. Now, here's the thing. Any movement faces a tension between a positive identity radiating out from the center and a negative identity reinforced around the edges. Does that make sense? Think of the nucleus in the center and then the membrane. I'm kind of mixing an atom and a cell. Think of the heart and the skin, okay? You need the positive thing in the middle, and you need the negative thing around the edges. Both are important. Al Mohler wrote a dissertation, I think he finished it in 1989, on evangelical responses to Karl Barth. Did you know this? Many of us know of Al Mohler from other things he's done, and I've appreciated various things that he has done, but I also appreciated this dissertation. A friend and I read through it many years ago. It's really interesting, and it brings up this question. He brings up the question of whether evangelical identity should be what he calls a boundaried or centered set of convictions. That's one way of getting at this. Should our identity be positive coming out from the middle, or should it be negative reinforced at the fringes? This is tricky. Both are important, okay? So, for example, a church needs to have a statement of faith that you have to sign on to be a member there and receive the Lord's Supper and so forth. But when someone first walks into the church, what they're experiencing isn't just a statement of faith. They're getting a sense of the core values, the overall vibe of the church, and so forth. A fundamentalist tendency is to focus so much on these edges, so much, and it gets defensive, and it gets fear-based. And it's more about kind of a negative posture towards the enemies out there than actually a positive, constructive celebration of the gospel. So we need the positive, constructive celebration of the gospel. That comes first, then that flows out into our polemics. So many people are getting this order wrong today.
Okay, let's take a second and digest what he just said there. Basically, what he's talking about is these two necessary components of the Christian church that we have to be self-analytical, self-criticizing in a way where we're actually analyzing our own doctrines and, what we believe and that kind of stuff, critical of falsity in the church and stuff like that, but also this sort of positive element, proclamation of the gospel. That's what he's talking about. And so he's basically likening that to a cell membrane, where that membrane is the protective, that's the self-critical part, and then on the inside is the core that's projecting outward the gospel. Whether it's a good analogy or not, I have no idea. But here's my critique. is this a legitimate critique of the modern church? Because it's the exact same critique people were giving 30 years ago. It's the critique that people criticized the religious right with, who today, as far as I'm concerned, could be modern day prophets. They told us exactly what was happening in culture and where we needed to fight some of these battles and why. But we responded with this exact argument that Ortlund is articulating. Well, the church just isn't being positive enough. The church needs to be nicer. And what's funny is, as a pastor, as a preacher of the gospel for 24 years, I have lived by these principles and I've preached this exact stuff only to find out that I was blatantly wrong. I did not foresee the culture-wide disintegration that Western civilization was undergoing. And I was being told the same lies that you all were, that we need to be tolerant, that we need to be nice, that, we need to leave room for the atheist. And, if someone wants to explore evolution, they should be able to do that. Those are the same things I was told. We need to be nice to the gays. We need to be nice to them because... there's nothing wrong. There's no difference between that sin and between coveting. Clearly there's no outward difference at all between sins, right? This language, this argumentation is part of the ethos of evangelical Christianity. And, I guess nothing new under the sun, right? But now getting back to the backdrop of where some of this is coming from, you see Ortlund coming out, defining what he calls fundamentalism, because he's gotten a lot of pushback recently on a video that he made about global warming. How does some of this play into the legitimacy of his argument? Well, I honestly think it makes it fall flat on its face. I mean, to the average consumer of content, the average person who's sitting out there listening hasn't been entrenched in ministry for 10 or 20 or 30 years. And, somebody who's brain dead and they don't see what is going on. They don't see that there are drag queens reading storybooks to our children, and that maybe the church needs to be, in this age, because it wasn't in the previous age, a little more defensive. This line of reasoning is what won out in the previous generation, and it's why we are where we are today. It works during a time of prosperity when everybody's happy, but when all of a sudden the Lord starts to take some of that prosperity out of our culture because of gross, inherent immorality, systemic immorality in every sphere of life, in culture, in politics, in music, in theology, in the church, God starts to take away some of our luxuries. Then all of a sudden, I think there needs to be some introspection. And honestly, I'm calling for the exact opposite here. Whoever's listening to me, I'm encouraging you, do not follow this strategy in your ministry, because it will be as successful as it has been historically and will lead to our eventual total collapse as a civilization, possibly in the not so distant future.
Oh, man, I could go on about this, but let me just hit the main point. May I speak with a little bit of passion here? Church of 2024, it is time to build and not just tear things down. We are in a time of colossal disintegration. We need new institutions. We need new efforts at constructive, positive gospel work. This is what I want Truth Unites to be about. It even goes into the title of my YouTube channel. I want to get.
But is this possible? Is this possible? Because again, we did this 30 years ago. We went through the same thing. It's just another cycle of the same old. And is that possible? Is he just the latest? And again, great respect for his scholarship on lots of issues. But is he dead wrong on this? Because this didn't work previously. Why on earth would we do it again? And why is there an uptick in what you would define as fundamentalism? Could it just be that people are fed up? And even, I'm talking like just your average Christian is fed up. We're fed up with these pagan narratives. We're fed up with seeing our culture fall apart and decadent immorality. We're fed up with it. We're fed up with divorce, and we're fed up with abortion, and we're fed up with all of these cultural ills. Could what you're trying to define as fundamentalism really be just whittled down to the fact that a lot of people are realizing these policies of the church have not worked. We need to be stronger. Maybe we need to get back to our roots as Christians, back to the way Christians were, the way the Apostle Paul was, very confrontational, even with people, especially with people in the church, the way that first generation of Christians was, and the second generation, and the third generation. Do we need to get back to a more ancient style of Christianity? Absolutely, we do. We need to have stronger convictions. And I'll talk in a couple of minutes about the idea of evolution, why when he goes into that, I think that is one of those die on the hill issues. I think that in large part we are where we are in our culture today because we didn't die on other issues. We didn't die on the hill of a handful of other issues, but that's one of those like top issues that we just said, well, let's, like the liberals all say today, I just want to have a conversation. That's what we did with that side. We said, well, let's just hear them out. And then here we are 50 years later, 100 years later, 150 years later. Culture is literally falling apart. All of the things, he notices this. He just commented on it. But I think the approach is flawed, and I'm not buying it.
My life to something constructive. It's like when you plant seeds in the ground, and then 50 years later, with enough water and rain, you got something where birds can perch in it. That's what I want to do with my life. I want to put out a library of videos that can serve and meet needs and promote gospel assurance. But that's what I'm trying to do. I don't do it perfectly, but there is so much tearing down right now. Criticism, separation, drawing boundaries, denouncing. And like Jude said, that's necessary, but sometimes it seems like that becomes our identity.
Okay, so who defines this? Like, who defines our strategy? It's not hard to think of the backdrop. It's not hard to think that Gavin Ortlund was just recently criticized pretty publicly in a book that was released about his comments on global warming. These were comments he really tried to sort of distance himself from and say that, there needs to be a conversation on the issue. Evangelicals shouldn't just push back against this. And he was called out on it publicly in a new book. And then it was reiterated that these criticisms were fair by mainline Christian YouTubers, leaders, several people that I saw. So it's hard not to see some of his comments, some of his attempts to define the argument, establish the boundaries of the argument in order to do damage control for some of what his own image has suffered recently. But let's talk about those things. Let's talk about global warming and the fact that you were upset about what you called mischaracterization on the topic of global warming. These are conversations we need to have. Yes, there are conversations we need to have, but we also, especially as preachers of the gospel and pastors, we need to listen to our flock and the things that people are saying. There's a huge percentage of the population, and I'm one of those people who thinks that the idea of global warming is absurd. It makes zero logical sense to me. We had, multiple, I don't know if we want to call them cold spells or mini ice ages. We had one major ice age that we know of that was probably created by Noah's flood. Even recently in human history, and I think this was in the early 1800s, there was like a year where there was like no summer. It was called the year of no summer, something like that. That's like fairly recently historically. And there were no carbon emissions. There was nothing going on. Like, there's fluctuation in climate, and that's the way it is. A lot of people think that the idea of global warming and the way that it is politicized today is not only absurd, but morally wrong. And if you look at it from a perspective of a Christian, a believer, you're looking at how the creation is worshipped over this issue, to the point where you have somebody who's saying, save the trees, but in a sense, kill the babies because they support a liberal view of abortion. It kind of brings to mind some of the characterizations of ancient paganism, and so, like, naturally so, like, I'll be honest with you, like, I don't care. I'm a sane thinking person. I can care less. I don't believe in global warming. I think that if someone has actual data that can actually show it to us, that isn't circumstantial, that shows us that it is real, and thirdly, I don't know if there was a second point in that or not, that there's anything we can actually do about it. This is a good point to be made. I just finally saw an article on this some time ago. People want us to move to electric vehicles under the banner of environmentalism, not realizing that you still have to burn coal to produce electricity. So everybody who's plugging your Tesla in, I want you to realize something. You are still fueling your car by fossil fuels. Like, do we all want to go back to the dark ages? Is that what we want? And sometimes, honestly, if you think about what the demons want to do, if you think about what Satan wants to do in the world, he wants to take us back to the dark ages. He wants us to go back to a time where he was celebrated, where foreign other gods were celebrated. That's what he wants to do. And sometimes from this far leftist agenda, that's what I feel like they're wanting us to do. I don't want to hear anything that they have to say. As far as I'm concerned, they're all demon possessed. And so a lot of people are coming from that vantage point. So you can't push back and then say, well, anybody who just, isn't softer on some of what I'm defining as peripheral issues, you're a fundamentalist. If you're painting me as a liberal, then you're a fundamentalist. Well, I wouldn't paint Gavin Ortlund as a liberal, but I would certainly say on these issues, absolutely he's liberal. Absolutely he is.
I think Galatians 5:15 is playing out on Twitter almost every day in the body of Christ. Richard Baxter said, be very careful when you have zeal for truth, because if you have zeal for truth, it can feel so good. But if you don't have love for the people that you're correcting, you can be used by Satan to tear people down, tear down the church. Is that happening today? Am I blind? Or am I the only one who is seeing a lot of Galatians 5:15 in the body of Christ today?
Okay, so again, I think what we're seeing here, in my opinion, this is his attempt to frame the argument, but I am not held to his sensitivities. And so if he has created backlash toward himself in a certain way, it's not my job to then jump on his bandwagon and label everybody that's disagreeing with him on a couple of issues, which I happen to disagree with him on. Then I'm not going to paint all of those as fundamentalists. In relation to the scripture that he just mentioned, do we as Christians need to love? Yes. But isn't living and walking in the truth and defending the truth, isn't this love? And this is part of what the modern church gets abhorrently wrong. We think that love is just anything that doesn't offend a person or doesn't offend in any way any of their little tiny fragile egos or sensitivities or proclivities. That's what we think love is. And that's actually, and that I would define that as hate. I would define that as biblical hate. So what we have today is a culture that celebrates hate, and the church that is bowing down to this.
This is a huge issue with fundamentalist tendencies. You make too many hills to die on. You make things litmus tests for who is my friend versus who is my foe, and you have too many of those things. And so you end up narrowing to these really parochial boundary markers. And I see the big issue that plagues it is ignorance of church history.
Basically, what he's trying to do is he's trying to say these issues are important and these issues aren't important. I want to make a case in a minute as to why I think the issue specifically that he's going to bring up and that he gets backlash for is an important issue. It is one of those things that I think because the church didn't die on that hill, I think we're dying now culturally because we didn't.
That premillennialism is a rare view historically. Historically, you have some church fathers like Irenaeus who affirmed a version of it, but it's basically absent between Augustine and the 17th century.
Okay, so talking about premillennialism, I happen to agree with him on this point. I'm actually a post-millennial guy. I don't know. I think Gavin Ortlund is amill, I think. But I don't know that you can really say premill is like a new doctrine or it's not a historical thing. In fact, one of the problems that you have if you're not premill is you have to wrestle with some of these early testimonies through Irenaeus and Papias, who seem to have been premillennial, and that's what we would call today historic premillennials. It's different from what came about in the 19th century, rather, through the Scofield Reference Bible and J.N. Darby, which is dispensational premillennialism. That's like the Left Behind series and all that stuff. That was a newer attempt at biblical literalism, and it just kind of made a mess out of eschatology. If you've studied any of that, I think you can, you know what I'm talking about. But the issue of, I actually don't like the way he frames that, even as a post-millennial guy. I think, you there's a lot of people that would make good arguments that premillennial is a historic
Let me say that
view.
again.
So
Nobody's premill for over a millennium. Nobody. Or hardly anybody. I don't really know of anybody.
But it seems like it was a big viewpoint in the earliest segment of the church that we have. Like even Papias apparently knew the Apostle John who wrote Revelation. So again, as a post-mill guy, I've got to explain that. But I mean, if anything, like how do you say that the premillennial? Again, I'm not a premillennialist.
Dispensational premillennialism was totally absent until the 19th century. Some people would push back on that a little bit, but in its essence, it was a novelty. So think about this for a second. This helps us get perspective on our own battles today. I think we need to hear this, even though it's a little bit punchy. The faculty at Fuller is fighting over two views, neither of which existed for the first 1900 years of church history. Now, we look back today and we might see this as, okay, that's kind of weird. But what are our grandchildren going to look back at us and say, either we underemphasize something or we were like this? Let me give an example. I cannot tell you how many times in the last 3 weeks somebody has called me a liberal or a wolf because I am not a young earth creationist. Dozens as things play out over the last few weeks. You know, I'll put out a tweet. It's like John 3:16. Someone says, wolf.
Okay, so you can see the pushback that he's getting. And I think there's a couple of things coming to a head here. I think he's been getting backlash over his views. I mean, probably because a lot of people have watched his career take off a little bit here and become a mouthpiece for the evangelical community, Christian conservatives, for Baptists, for evangelicals. And all of a sudden he comes out and he says, yeah, I believe in an old age of the earth. I honestly don't know if he believes in evolution or not. It seems to me that most people who believe that the earth is old believe in evolution. So I'm just kind of guessing, but also that there was a local flood. I think there was probably a big level of disappointment with that. And then more recently, this thing that came out where he was called out in this new book, it's gained a lot of traction. You can see why this video was produced. It's because of a lot of the criticism he's been getting, but you can see it there.
You believe in millions of years, and that seems to be growing. That seems to be increasing. But I think it's basically a function of historical ignorance. It's just, let me just make the case real quick here as one representative.
Now, I listen to the things that he's going to bring up, because this is where I would actually say he's giving misleading information. So just think for yourself on this one. Look at some of the examples he uses. And honestly, Dr. Ortlund, there is no possible rational way you can justify a modern understanding of millions and billions of years and evolution or deep time with the Bible and the historic view of the Bible. Like, there's no way that you can do that, because until evolution came about in the mid-1800s, you didn't see anybody who was challenging these kinds of things. Nobody. If anything, what you saw like little sprinkles of were people who believed that the universe was eternal, which was basically a pagan idea. That was the ancient Greek idea. So as Hebrews interacted with the Greek world, and I think Philo was one who believed in, Philo might have believed in instantaneous creation. Sometimes you see people who believed in instantaneous creation, which isn't millions or billions of years. That's still young earth. I mean, it still means that God created it all at once, not over these long, gradual, natural processes through the paradigm of uniformity or uniformitarianism. That idea does not come about. You are being intellectually dishonest to say that idea existed at all in anywhere other than in pagan mythology. If you want to link it to this idea of the ancient pagans, that the universe was eternal, you do not see any in church history. I mean, find one for me, please. And if you find one, you'll find one. But I mean, everybody believed in the Genesis narrative, like everybody. And honestly, what did the ancient Hebrews believe? What did they believe? The original audience. I mean, this is a big deal with interpretation. Like as preachers of the gospel, when we're trying to interpret the Bible and for a modern audience, like, what did it mean to the original audience? Was there any ancient Hebrew, like a single one of those Israelites that were walking around in the wilderness and the ones that lived in the promised land, that didn't take Genesis chapter 1 literally. Anyone. Okay, let's listen to what he says.
An example of
here.
where I'm concerned about an uptick of fundamentalist tendencies. Same
We're
thing as people
fundamentalists
fighting
'cause we
over
believe this.
pre-mill without being aware of how that has no historical backing. If believing in an ancient world and rejecting young earth creationism is liberal, then the following people are liberal. Charles Spurgeon,
We're waiting.
the great Baptist preacher, June 17th, 1855, he preaches a sermon. He doesn't even blink to talk about the millions of years before Adam. It's just not even an issue.
Now, this is when evolution was on the rise. This is when Charles Spurgeon lived, when it was, first popularized, 1850 something. I don't know. Charles Darwin publishes Origin of Species. Although some people, it was believed upon in some fashion. It was being formed. The idea was being formed before Darwin, if I remember correctly. But just before Darwin, like in the few decades leading up to Darwin. But the time frame of it, 1800s, his claim, history is on his side. Again, before the 1800s, who believed in this?
You can just tell he's just throwing it out there. He's not even aware this is going to be controversial. Number 2, J. Gresham Machen. He wrote the book, Christianity and Liberalism. I'll recommend that more at the end. Hallmark defense of the fundamentals. And he's saying, certainly you don't have to be young earth. Number 3, Warfield and Hodge at Old Princeton.
And all these people lived 18s, 1900s. That's all the people that he's referencing here. I think his attempt is to try to say that these are people that evangelicals, especially evangelicals from the Reformed community, really respect in a lot of regards, all the names that he's mentioning. But the problem is they're all recent historical examples. And so, my point with this is that their approach to this issue is in large part why the church and culture is where we are today. Why is this such a big issue for me? It's because I look at the culture and I would say that the issue of evolution, specifically Darwinianism, it has been, in my opinion, more responsible than Marxism, more responsible than the Enlightenment, more responsible than atheism or the sexual revolution or anything else for a lot of the stuff that we see going on in our culture today. Because some of those things we saw, they just impacted the elites of society, whether it was the Enlightenment or Marxism or things like that, Nietzsche, God is dead, that kind of stuff, and trying to create a new morality without the Bible. Just a little problematic what Nietzsche was trying to do, right? These things mainly just sort of infiltrated elitist circles, the elites of society. But evolution is something that today is taught to second graders, that the earth is millions of years old. What Charles Darwin did in Darwinian evolution was it popularized this pagan mythology, which is really what it is, that the Bible isn't true. It popularized this idea that there is no divine being orchestrating all the events of human history, and it sowed the seeds. I mean, quite blatantly. I mean, to say that it sowed the seeds that the biblical narrative isn't true is a gross, negligent understatement. The pervasiveness of it, the level on which it's taught and embraced culturally today, I think has done massive, massive damage to a Christian's ability to share the gospel with the average person. And so why are we having these fights? Why do we die on some of the hills that we die on? I'm going to wrap this video up in a minute here, but I just want to, focus in on this point here. Why are we doing this, and why is this an important fight? Why do I spend a lot of my time combating this specific issue? Because I'm convinced that the science teaches, at least that the geologic column is young. At least that. I mean, it's debatable how does distant starlight reach the world, but the geologic column proves a global flood because it's all sedimentary rock with little to zero evidence of erosion in between layers. There's lots of dead fossilized things in there. And all of those fossilized things they're finding now, surprise, surprise, soft tissue in them. They can't be millions or billions of years old. And so how has this idea just absolutely crippled the ability of Christians to preach the gospel today, while we're talking about that positive core going out, while we're talking about that, shouldn't we do some protective hedging in culture to make it safe and reasonable to be a Christian? See, what's happened today is Christians basically have just given up in many of these fights, and they're left sitting there going, yeah, but you still need to receive Jesus. He still rose from the dead. Why would somebody believe that Jesus rose from the dead if they don't believe that anything else in the Bible is true? Do you see how dysfunctional that approach is? And why, at least from my perspective, and I think the perspective of a lot of other sane thinking individuals, the fight has to be for our origin. I mean, that's the most natural place to go. Did God really say? Did God really say? See, if we win that fight, it's a lot easier to evangelize. If people know and believe and understand it's true that God wiped out the world once, they're probably a lot more likely to believe that there will be a judgment when they die and that they need to be right with God and Jesus whom they sent. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see the logic there? Do you see why this is actually an important issue? And when I heard him talk on this previously, he didn't engage the science at all, which to me is just bad scholarship. I mean, we can go back in church history and we can find somebody, Philo or someone else who believed maybe in an instantaneous creation, or maybe some early Christian apologist who believed that the universe was eternal. That ancient Greek idea, not Hebrew, but ancient Greek idea. We can find somebody who believes those things, but then are we just sort of like turning our theology into a buffet and what we want to make it? I think what we need to do is try to arrive at the conclusions that the Bible wants us to arrive at, not just say, what is my range of possibilities for belief? And now I look at it like a buffet and, this makes the most sense to me. I don't like that. No, let me put that down and go with some chicken wings over here. It's like, I just feel like sometimes that's what people do today. Michael Jones, he does a lot of Christian apologetic stuff, which I appreciate, but I cannot understand where he's coming from on the evolution issue at all. He does some scriptural hermeneutical gymnastics with Genesis chapter 1. With Gavin Ortlund in particular, I really wish, and I think that if he's going to talk on origins, I think that he has to engage the science, because to me, that's where the young earth creationists, at least when we're looking at the fossil record, anything beyond that, it's a little more wide open, but the fossil record is young, period. End of story. Young earth creationists have won that debate. It's that clear. And so to basically say, I'm not going to look at any of that, but this is why I think you can still be a Christian and believe in evolution or believe in millions of years. It's bad scholarship from somebody who is, quite frankly, an impressive scholar. And I don't say that lightly. Gavin Ortlund, a very impressive scholar on a variety of issues. But as a scholar myself, I would strongly encourage him. I'd even love to have some kind of dialogue, I'd just like to personally pose these questions as to why, from a scientific point of view, you believe in an old earth. Because I can articulate my view as a young earth creationist. I probably can articulate his view, but can he articulate why a young earth creationist believes that the fossil record is young? I just did. I mean, you can listen to what I said, but I could give you 100 other arguments as well. So can he articulate that? And that's why I think this issue is an issue that we as Christians, we've got to die on that hill. That is why I think this is a complex issue. And am I a bad guy for saying that? Is anybody else who doesn't fit into Gavin Ortlund's frame of a nice evangelical, are we fundamentalists? Because he's saying he's been portrayed as a liberal. Is he kind of doing the same thing by framing us? I'm a fundamentalist. I mean, that you can say something like that in a YouTube video, but it's being said about me specifically, or if you are a young earth creationist like I am. And you see the importance of these valid points that I'm making historically. Just this issue of evolution, the Christian church did not do a good enough job. They did not take it seriously. They did not engage it well. And quite frankly, that is why we are. That is one of the reasons, one of the major reasons why we are where we are culturally today. So a little disappointed in this response. I wanted to kind of paint some of the backdrop of it for you to help you see it in its full context and really to kind of push back a little and say, hey, no, you can't label us as fundamentalists. You can't label me as a fundamentalist. I'm somebody who actually believes that the Bible says what it says, and that's important. That's key. You can say, I'm framing you however I want to frame you. That's fine. But I mean, the issue of fundamentalism, if you're redefining fundamentalism today, Dr. Ortlund, if you're doing that, then I'm happy to be labeled a fundamentalist, because increasingly, I think Christians need to take their beliefs into the culture. This is what Paul does in Acts chapter 17. It's a great, but people love to go to Acts chapter 17 and they love to say, boy, look at how nice Paul was. Look at how he complimented these pagan gods, these statues, these idols, setting these people up for his sermon. But what did he do at the end of his sermon in Acts chapter 17? He talked about the judgment, and he didn't shy away from it. He says, everyone will be judged by that one man whom God appointed. And one of the interesting things that Paul says there is he says that all men were descended from one man. I think that's a great place to end, because I think it's a great tongue-in-cheek way of saying, hey guys, even in the mind of the Apostle Paul, evolution was unthinkable. We all descended from a human being, not from a monkey. And that's where I'm going to close this video up today. Having said that, I would love it if you would like, share, subscribe, and comment on this video, as, again, it helps me to develop ideas and at least get some feedback for future videos. I do read your comments, and I may even respond to you. So may God bless you, friends. If you haven't got a chance and you're interested in the topic of eschatology or dispensationalism, which we brought up in this video, you can get my book, End Times Mission. It's available on Amazon. You can also go to pastoraj.com. There's a link to it there. That's probably the easier way to find it. It'll give you a great history of dispensationalism and why you should be post-millennial, because King Jesus is reigning from heaven right now. Friends, I will see you in the next video, and as always, it was great to gospel with you.